Hey everyone, I'm rather incoherent, and this is the Daryl deck I'm planning on playing in Dream Eaters. This was originally going to be a live deck building video, but unfortunately OBS wasn't picking up my mic, I didn't notice, so now it's going to be a post-commentary deck building video. This deck is modified from the first Daryl I played, which was a difficulty 0 deck, and when you look at this compared to the difficulty 0 deck, the deck is substantially more expensive, and I actually have less economy. The deck might initially look sick if you forget economy exists, like I apparently did, but it actually has a huge problem. And to really get into that, I want to first talk about how I manage the economy of my decks when I build them. So when I'm managing my economy, this is the formula I use. Total resources generated minus total resources spent equals a number, and that number is my economy. And you can get a range of results, and they'll tell you how your deck should be adjusted. First, I want to dig into the idea of baseline resources. It's not just your 5 starting resources. You get more than that. You get a resource per turn, and when I'm doing my economy math, I think I need to be set up by turn 5. If it's later than turn 5 and I'm not set up, it's taking too long. Whereas if it's turn 3 and I need 2 more resources, I can oftentimes be like, I don't need to play Tetsuo now, I'll play him in 2 turns. Stuff like that. So I consider myself to have 10 baseline resources, and that tends to work out. This is the way I've been doing my economy math for a long time, and it's gotten the right result pretty much forever. I can't remember the last time I actually did the math, and also had a deck that didn't have enough money. So if we take a look at this deck, you'll see its total resources generated are, let's talk about Milan. There are some cards you're gonna need to have an estimate of what their actual impact is, right? For Milan, I count him as a 0. He will make his money back and then some, but at the same time, at some point he will be a cost. I count him as a 0 and somehow it keeps working out. So maybe he's actually a positive number and that's why it's working out, but for my purposes, I count Milan as 0. And when you go through the deck and add up the cost, I can't actually hover over this because I'm in a video because I'm a goof, but 1, 2, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. The deck costs 21 resources. How much money does it make? 10. The baseline 10. I'm at negative 11. So when you get the possible result of negative 10, it means you literally forgot your economy, and it's like a cartoon vehicle coming apart around you. You can't play any of your cards, it's going terribly wrong. You need to remake the deck. That was the impetus for this video, realizing that I was driving that cartoon card. So let's talk about the other results and actually establish what I'm looking to get, because to your surprise, it might not be 0. Negative 3 is obviously bad. If you get a bad draw order, you'll play just like a negative 10 deck, but if you get a good draw order, you're going to struggle a little bit, be a few resources short, it's going to be unpleasant, but it'll still be a workable deck. And draw order is the important thing here, because at 0, when your economy perfectly lines up, it doesn't actually work. If your economy lines up perfectly, then what you will often find is that you don't have the money to pay for some. You have Tetsuo in hand, standing others in your deck, but you have no resources right now. Stuff like that happens constantly with 0. Every time you need to play something, you need to play an economy asset, or event rather, first, and that results in 0 having a lot of bad times where you draw your economy in the wrong order. What you actually want is like positive 2 to positive 5. You want to have 1 more economy card than you need, because that really heavily tilts the math in your favor to not need to ever take resource actions, to not desperately be drawing to get more economy. Whereas if it's a huge positive number, you have the opposite problem, right? You have 5 resources, nothing to spend them on, you draw a Faustian Bargain. That's not a good spot to be in. The Faustian Bargain is useless. As a matter of fact, so was the previous Faustian Bargain, because you still haven't found a way to spend it. So ideally, your economy is going to equal 2 to 5. Negative 11 is not what you're looking for. And here's past me talking about the same stuff, and if you look at this deck, the old one I was running, you can see it costs like literally nothing, right? 2 for a camera, 1 for a keyring, 2 for this, 1 for that. We're looking at 6. Then we start counting events. Already we're fine, right? We can just play the events later. We don't have to play those immediately. But sure. We're at 6, we go up to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we're at negative 4, nothing left to lose is easily going to be worth 3 each time. It's at least an emergency cash. So yeah, easy, cool. The deck costs nothing, so the economy works. And when I adjusted this to be a clue dropper archetype, I was like, I don't have the experience or card slots for nothing left to lose. And then I was like, wait a second, didn't I cut my economy from the cheap deck while I made it more expensive? Thus the video. So then we go to how I build my decks. I just add all the cards that I want. You can see we're now playing a 38 card deck, And I've done the economy math even though the deck is already too big and this can't be a final deck, because I need to know what I'm cutting. Am I cutting economy? Do I have to cut expensive cards? What's going on? Right now, compared to the previous deck, what I've done is I've added Burning the Midnight Oil, Crack the Case, Take Heart, and Resourceful. Resourceful is here because Resourceful should be in every single Shadowlight deck, and I just wasn't aware of that when I was first building this deck. And my math comes up to +1, which means the economy in this deck is actually completely fine, because remember, I'm recurring Shadowlight repeatedly over the course of the scenario. Even with only 2 Shadowlights counted, this is 24 to 21. The issue is I have to maintain that economy balance, actually it's 24 to 19, but I have to maintain that economy as I cut down, and this is a guide for me on how to do that. So moving a little bit further into the deck building, you can see I've updated my math. I realized I shouldn't be counting those extra Shadowlights. The total cost is 19. I've cut Take Heart. I'm only at +1. That's not good enough. And the reason I've cut the Take Heart is because you actually can't really fail Take Heart very reliably on Daryl. You can't fail a fist test and punch somebody. You can't fail head test completely reliably if they're difficulty 3, as many Mythos cards are. And at the point where Take Heart really only lets you fail if you get a head treachery, it's not a good card. Ideally, Take Heart is on a character with low book, which is the complete opposite of Daryl. It doesn't work very well on him. So it's an easy cut in terms of just not being a good fit for the deck. As for the other 4 cuts that I've made, they don't affect my economy. I've realized that Gumption shouldn't be in this deck. Because even though Gumption's great with Shadowlight and with Daryl, the fact is you just have to make cuts to fit the economy in. Same thing with Out of Crossroads. Out of Crossroads is a great card, it's a good draw. But it doesn't really, I've got to cut things. They don't all fit in the deck. There's just not enough room. And all the stuff over here is locked. I can't cut any of these assets at all. Every single one of them is or clue dropping or it's Dr. Milan, right? And as we go on, we'll see that I actually reevaluate what does core mean, and these numbers on the left side will start to change. I'm eventually going to cut a Milan and an empirical hypothesis because I'm such a high draw character that I can get away with that. Skipping ahead, you can see that things change. Suddenly our total cost is up to 25 and our total resources up to 30, because this is the process I build decks by. I take away and I add, and I take away and I add, and I rebalance until they feel good. In this case, we've added Mr. Rooks, which has increased our cost, and I do count both Mr. Rooks because he is expendable soak. I expect him to die. And Mr. Rook is really, really good. The deck had no expendable soak before, and it has a lot more consistency with the Mr. Rook, so he fits really nicely into the deck. And with Mr. Rook, I can comfortably run Astounding Revelation and Cryptic Writings. Both of these cards are going to work a lot better now. Mr. Rook can trigger Cryptic Writings intentionally. I have 2 ways of hitting Astounding Revelation. The economy gets a lot stronger. And that's the reason it occurred to me in the first place that maybe I should be running Mr. Rook, is because Mr. Rook actually enables a bunch of Seeker economy that otherwise doesn't work nearly so well. But you can see there have been some cuts to get down to 35 with all these new cards that are really painful. Analysis is missing. That's fine for Practice Makes Perfect, but for a clue dropper, analysis can give you a lot of weird sorts of value where you're just throwing clues on the ground because you want to, not because you need to. Likewise, I've cut Captivating Discovery, which is a really, really good card, but maybe I don't need it, because in my experience playing Clue Dropper Daisy, most of my clue dropping value came from Mailson and Quick Study, not the events or analysis. It was these 2 assets that did the work. Cutting forward again, you can see I'm down to 30 cards. I've cut the Cryptic Writings, I've added Out of Crossroads and Nature of the Beast back in. But even though I'm at 30 cards, my economy is only equal. I actually need more money than this deck is currently getting. And then I finally solved the economy problem, but not in the way I wanted. I realized a rules issue. My economy's been so expensive because of Shadowlight, but I actually can't put Shadowlight in this Daryl deck. It's against the rules. Why? Because Shadowlight only works on an investigation check. Research notes are not an investigation check. And Daryl will be investigating, but very frequently the way he investigates, or gets clues rather, is with research notes that makes Shadowlight much, much harder to use. Once I realized that Shadowlight wasn't actually fitting in the deck very neatly at all, it made the economy a lot easier. Because now we're up to 23 to 18, +5, that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'd actually still be at +2 if I cut this emergency cash, which is sort of just filler right now. And that's how I ended up getting the economy to a workable state, by cutting an event that I really, really wanted that realistically the character can't afford. And if we come over to the actual deck that I finished Dream Eaters with, because I've already finished recording the whole series at this point, you can see that not always am I adhering to my original plans. Sometimes I realize that. My previous deck had cut Analysis, it had cut Lucky. Those cards are way, way too good to cut, so they actually stayed in the final list, and the plans changed. In coming over to the final deck that I had, you can see I have 20 total economy, 18 total expenditure, and a +2. The deck does work. I will note that I realized by playing this Daryl deck, Even though Mr. Rook is expecting to be played twice, it's not during the first 5 turns. He can be played on much later with the money you're getting from time passing, so it's really only the first Mr. Rook I need to count, just like it would have only been the first 2 Shadow Lights. And as you watch me play through Dream Eaters, you can verify what I'm saying, the Serial Deck's economy works pretty smoothly. It's because this formula that I've been using for like a year now is just a really good way to calculate the economy. And at the end of the day, the entirety of this video just comes down to this simple formula. Total resources minus total resource cost, and ideally you get a low positive number. That's exactly how this deck works. It's how most of my decks that I really think hard about work. And yeah, and that's going to be it. I just wanted to briefly share how I manage the economy of my decks and why I manage them the way I do, and how it affects my deck building. How, if nothing else, getting a very different answer than a low positive number is a litmus test for me to reevaluate a deck in the case of this Clue Dropper Daryl. I hope this was helpful to you in some way. If it was, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really does help the channel grow, and I'll see you in the next one.